Welcome back everybody, Mark with exoticcarplayplace. Thanks for joining the channel again. Today we're going to talk about how can you live with the most unreliable 5 Series car on the planet. That just happens to be the car behind me, the illustrious E60 M5 with the S85 V10 motor. So how do you live with that car? First of all, I'm going to review with you some of the dirty facts on some of the reliability concerns with these cars, and then I'm going to talk to you about how do you manage that so you can enjoy long life with this car. You can really enjoy all of its benefits and not have to face a lot of the negative side of the car ownership. So here we have the illustrious E60 M5, of course, not a cheap car to maintain, mainly due to the fact that this was a very, very expensive car when it was new, which retailed for about $135,000 when it was new. So that's why that expense carries through, even though it's an older car and now you can get these down as cheap as about $12,000, $15,000. It is still based on that $130,000 MSRP price tag, which essentially is into the next stratospheric level of maintenance costs and purchase price. So you're going to expect higher elevated maintenance costs and reliability concerns in a lot of cases, as more premium cars tend to have more complexity and obviously have more risk and maintenance related issues. So let's get moving. Let's talk about some of the factors on this car. Right here, brakes, cross-drilled brakes. Look at that. Very expensive to replace. Not a real issue, although the later cars actually had an upsized version of these brakes which worked better, but these are definitely more than adequate for the task. That's in itself not a big deal. When we look around here, generally speaking, the car is quite easy to maintain. You know, the body lines aren't that sharp. The ride height is quite high, so you don't have to worry too much about curbing the car all that much. It's actually quite high. Okay, so that's not a big deal in itself. Now let's review some of the issues that you're going to find with this car. So I'm going to pop the hood to get started. So now we're looking under the hood of this beautiful E60 M5, and let's talk about some of the issues that you're going to find with this car. Number one, VANOS. Right here, they're tucked away underneath this little cover. VANOS and the related VANOS, the high pressure lines that are associated with the VANOS and the VANOS pump and the lines, are all part and parcel to an issue that is fairly consistent with these cars. The pump, the pressure lines, and the VANOS mechanical components here, which alter the cam timing based on the engine RPM and whatnot. So that is one major failure point on these cars, or 3 if you will. Number 1, the lines have been known to burst. Very, very common fact. The pump has been known to pop and not work or leak or just fail outright, and thus creating a condition where obviously you'll have fault codes and the car won't run anymore. As well as these VANOS parts here, the mechanical components start rattling and making noise. So you'll have, that's a telltale. The VANOS here starts to rattle around and kind of make a little bit of clinky noise, and you'll start to know that there's an issue in here. But again, those are 3 failure parts. Now you know the VANOS runs off the engine oil too, right? So that in itself is why engine oil is so important in this car. So when we always talk about the oil changes in these things, it's pretty easy to say we all know that this thing has rod bearings, and we'll get to that. But the rod bearing issues come largely to the fact that you have clearance tolerance issues within the bearings and the rod journals and a high viscosity level of oil, but that oil is also required in the VANOS. And so it's not as simple as changing your oil viscosity, style, type, manufacturer, brand, whatever. That can actually have an impact on your VANOS system, which utilizes your engine oil. And so that's why, you know, it's pretty easy to answer the question, go with the thinner oil, but it does have an impact on your pump and your pressure lines here for the VANOS. Now those VANOS systems, they can vary, like failure rate on those can vary depending on the mileage. It can vary to a large degree. Some last a long time and others fail at, 30,000 miles, 50,000 miles, 80,000. There seems to be sort of an inconsistent amount of failure or failure rate on the VANOS system. Now another thing that you're going to find here, now under these beautiful intake plenums, you also have the idle actuators, throttle actuator business in there. But what happens with those, because they are poorly constructed, and again, it's one of those design flaws by BMW where the internal gears there's tiny little teeth on the gears within the actuators that are made of plastic. And those plastics with time start to wear away, or they shear under a certain load, and then boof, they miss some gears, and next thing you know, you have a throttle actuator failure, and then you have to replace one. Now there's two, there's one on either side, one per bank. And of course, at the tune of $2,000-3,000, it becomes a very expensive proposition. Is there any solution for that? Not really, other than the fact that there are guys now aftermarket taking those in as a trade. They rebuild them with metal gears, which they guarantee a much extended life out of them. But again, that's the aftermarket. That's not factory. You take your car into the dealership, you say your throttle actuator goes, they're going to put in a brand new, replace it with a factory plastic piece, which again has a limited lifespan. That is kind of an issue. So that's another failure point. Now when we talk about the engine, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, was the rod bearing. So underneath the bottom end of the engine here is where the rod bearings exist, because you have the crankshaft and the rod bearings at the very bottom. And what'll start to happen is you might start hearing rod knock noises. You'll possibly start to hear things at the bottom end. But a lot of times it's not visible, and a lot of times you don't get rod knock. But in virtually almost all E60 or the S85 engines, you will see an accelerated rod bearing issue. Now, does it mean they're all going to fail catastrophically? And well, no, not really. In a lot of cases, they don't fail at all. In most cases, they don't fail at all, but there have been catastrophic failures. Now, there are solutions to that, and I've mentioned in other videos of mine. So the rod bearings are a problem, but the rod bearings can be largely solved by the use of frequent oil changes, very extended warm-up periods, which is to ensure that your rod bearings get enough oil between them before you really start putting load on the engine. So you want to have a good warm engine before you drive it hard, for sure, which is going to have a positive impact on not only the rod bearings, but again, the VANOS system, which we alluded to earlier. Oil has to be warmed up. Critical warm-up procedure on these cars will positively impact the longevity of your rod bearings as well as the VANOS system. So those are two major things, the rod bearings and the VANOS. Now there's another thing, is you can't see here, but we'll just talk about it at a distance, is the SMG transmission. And that's buried underneath, of course. But we're going to go in here, and you can tell this is an SMG. You can get the E60 M5 in one of two ways. You could either get it like this with the SMG transmission, which is a 7-speed automated manual gearbox, or you get it in a 6-speed manual. This is not a 6-speed manual, so therefore this is the SMG III transmission. Transmission itself, the core base tranny, is good. It's the hydraulic system that is weak. That's the SMG system that can be weak. You get actuator problems, you can have a lot of issues around, and obviously the SMG as a whole has definitely many more failure modes than a regular standard transmission. So how do you fix that? Well, other than driving it properly, things that you can avoid doing to it, and that is abusive driving. So the launch control is the most abusive thing that you can do for the SMG transmission, and as a result, you probably don't want to do that. That also has a negative impact on the rear differential, which is tucked in underneath, of course. So the proper oil changes, of course, right now they recommend 1060, of course, as factory, which some are going to argue is way too heavy. 550 is what some people like to use. I question whether that is totally adequate for the VANOS system, but maybe it's fine. I haven't really tested that theory yet. For now, I'm using a 1060. More importantly than just the oil, though, proper warm-up. So these are the things that are going to help you keep this thing running long and healthy. Proper oil changes with the proper specification of synthetic oil, and frequently changed. And when I say frequently, the hell with what the dealer's telling you at 18,000 kilometers. When you do a reset to this and it tells you, oh, you're good for another 18,000 kilometers or whatever that is, 12,000 miles, forget it. That's going to kill this thing. So what you want to do is, I don't even push this any more than about 3,000 miles or 5,000 kilometers. I don't even go that far, but that's, if I were to use this lots in the summer, I would go that far. Don't go any more than that. So that's a major thing to help improve the life of the rod bearing issue in the engine itself. Of course, the other thing that you can do as preventative maintenance, of course, is get the Blackstone Oils laboratory testing. That's another thing which I've highlighted in some of my videos in the past. That's another option as a preventative measure. I would recommend it. It's a good way to trend the condition of your bottom end. Another thing you can do to save some of the electronics is make sure you're running a good solid battery, that your battery isn't weak. When you're not driving the car lots, put it on a battery tender. That's going to save some of the electronics. Electronics do not like to run on too low a voltage. that can create burnout conditions, that can create failures in some of the modules and whatnot. Good healthy battery. Another thing is the transmission SMG system. Operate it within the normal tolerances. Don't put it into race mode unless you're really ready to go racing. It's better to drive it in mid-level speed, or possibly, you know, you can set it up for S5 for sure, no problem there, which is the way I prefer it. But the hard shifts and launch control, save that for the track or save that for special occasions. Constant abuse on the tranny will take its toll on the differential and transmission. Possibly the SMG failures as well will start to hit you as well. So those are the big things. That's how you can avoid premature failures on this car. Some things you just can't avoid are some of the big expenses around standard maintenance items like brakes and tires. All of that's going to cost a lot more money. But if you do those little things that I just talked about, the rest of the car sort of just lasts. You don't abuse it, you maintain it properly. Lots of oil changes, it doesn't hurt. Keep doing those frequent oil changes. Just don't abuse it. Drive it, have fun, spirited drives. Take care of the thing. Lots and lots of maintenance. Those are the items that'll hurt you. So if you take care of them, they'll take care of you. So I really hope you enjoyed that video, guys. I'd love to see you come back in the next one, because this is all E60 content. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for this. So as a result, please come back to the next one, guys. Love to see you give it a thumbs up, like, comment below if you agree or disagree. And most importantly, again, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that notifications bell. That's going to let you know when the next video pops up. Love to see you in the next one. See you then. Bye-bye.